Welcome to the War Room. It's Thursday, July the 9th, the year of our Lord 2020. Remember that date. It's going to be an important one as we head closer and closer to the polls. Here it is. It's a humid day here on Capitol Hill. Got Greg Mans, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam in the War Room on the John Fredericks Radio Network, America's Voice.news, later on Newsmax TV, and blown through the firewalls in China by G News and GTV, subtitled in Mandarin. We've got a packed out show for you this morning, heading over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, we're going to have, I think, the results of this really important Supreme Court decision on President Trump's taxes. That could happen at any moment, and when it does, we'll break in and try to get Jim Schultz, the former White House counsel, on with us. I want to start with something that's, I think, very disturbing. And this is the Biden campaign has now announced I think a $700 billion Buy American program. They're going to announce it today in Scranton, Pennsylvania. And here's the reason this is of concern is that the Biden, forget the thing about Sleepy Joe and all that. Biden is like the character in El Cid, the movie that Charlton Heston was, the mythic or heroic character from Spanish history. He died and they just put him in the saddle. Right? That's what Joe Biden is, the kind of El Cid candidate, but he's got very smart people around him, and particularly on the economic side. And what they're trying to do is essentially steal the Trump program of 2016 and run that playbook. And today in Scranton, Pennsylvania, they're going to announce a Buy American program, and for somehow the White House and the campaign has been caught flat-footed. And this is President Trump owns this narrative. He's been the Buy American president. He's been the Hire American president. We know that they know that's bouncing around there. They've got actions they want to take. We're going to have Rosemary Gibson on a little later in the show. Remember, we introduced Rosemary to the country back in January when we first started the show. Is about the supply chains for all our drugs, the APIs, generic drugs, all the PPE. Everything is really made in China. And her effort is her whole book, China RX. She's the co-author that the whole book is to talk about how we got to bring that manufacturing back to the United States. For some reason, this entire thing is stalled, and so we've got to get our hands around this because there's some polling out from Cook Report and others that is pretty grim. There's also some polling that looks like a little better, but we're going to get into all that. I want to bring in Curtis Ellis first. He's with the PAC, and he's the head of the policy over at the America First Priorities PAC. Curtis Ellis and Peter Navarro know the economic program of the president better than anybody. And Ellis and Navarro have been hammering on China. But Curtis, I got to bring you on. And the frustration, particularly among the populists and economic nationalists, couldn't be higher. I mean, this is what made the managed decline by our elites, basically kowtowing to the Chinese Communist Party, is what got us in this situation. You and Peter and Navarro have been railing about this literally for decades. Finally, a candidate like Donald Trump really got understood the message. He had been a follower of Lou Dobbs for many decades. He understood this for decades. It all came together, and really the essential was Buy American, Hire American. And now today in Scranton, Pennsylvania, remember, we keep saying Joe Biden's the candidate from Wilmington, Delaware. He's the senator that represents the global corporations. That's Wilmington, Delaware exists for one reason. It's a mail drop for global corporation, and it's got a fairly compliant federal courthouse there. And yet Joe Biden, and this is because his team's very smart, they're going to Scranton, Pennsylvania, which is in a state that President Trump has to carry, a state we carried before in 2016. And what is he doing? He's announcing a $700 billion Buy American program, really trying to steal the narrative and actually the branding of President Trump's program. So Curtis, how did we get in this situation? First off, what is President Trump's Buy American? Why have we not seen more action on that lately, particularly when you have people like Rosemary Gibson, Dan D'Amico, yourself, Peter Navarro, these hardcore economic nationalists that understand this is going to be about jobs. The important thing here is to bring jobs back, high value-added manufacturing jobs, to lead the fourth industrial revolution. And that's a convergence of technology, research money, and good old-fashioned American grit and determination and understanding the know-how to understand how to manufacture. So Curtis, I want to turn it over to you. to walk us through this. But people are shocked right now, and you're going to see in a minute when we start walking through these numbers. When the Cook report said there's a blue tsunami, not a blue wave, there's a blue tsunami that's building in July of 2020. Somebody's got to get their hands around this. So Curtis, can you tell us exactly how we ended up in July with Joe Biden announcing a Buy American program and kind of crickets from the White House?
Yes, it's very clear reading Joe Biden's program, his proposal, that he is watching your show and listening to this podcast. You can add him to the audience, and Jared Bernstein, his key advisor. And they also read Peter Navarro's executive order, because this incorporates everything that Peter Navarro's executive order on pharmaceutical supply chains addresses. It addresses using federal procurement power to incentivize production in the United States. It addresses the tax code. It addresses closing the loopholes in the trade agreements. Well, actually, that's the one thing it doesn't address, and I'll get to that in a moment. And it addresses advanced manufacturing, using the latest manufacturing techniques developed in the United States and deployed in the United States. This is straight out of Peter Navarro's executive order, which has been stalled and hung up, because you have to realize, and you understand this, Steve, that there is about 6 decades of policy and precedent that President Trump's Buy American, Hire American economic nationalist programs run diametrically opposed to. So we have to cut through several decades of dogma, of heresy, of globalism that's hung up at every level of the administration, every level of our policies, laws, trade agreements. Now, one thing that Biden...
Curtis, hang on for 1 second. I got to go through this. Okay, look, that 6 decades is what Joe Biden represents. And we'll get, exactly. You're the best in the world of doing this. I kind of take your hymnal and just sing from it. But we're going to get, Biden is a globalist. Biden has supported every policy to shift a job. Jared Bernstein is an economic nationalist. Bernstein is one of the toughest critics of the NAFTA. The reason Bernstein is even with Biden is that these guys understand the way to win, and I've said this over and over again, a globalist economic policy cannot win in 2020. It didn't win in 2016. It's one of the reasons Hillary Clinton is not president of the United States. Okay?
That's right. She
ran as an economic globalist. President Trump ran as an economic nationalist. The economic nationalists will always win in this day and time. The inclusion of Jared Bernstein's handprints are all over this. And this is what not just the irony, this is the tragedy from the Trump campaign and the Trump White House perspective, is that Biden doesn't believe in any of this. Biden's whole career is really anti this, right? They've got some collective bargaining, some things for unions, but overall, if you look at this is, and I want you're the expert, but when I look at this is Jared Bernstein and the guys around Biden saying, hey, if we want to stop Trump in Wisconsin, Michigan, Pennsylvania, and Ohio, right? Mm-hmm. If we want to do that, we've got to get back to that. We got to go to their playbook and run the playbook on them. And now they've jumped out there today with something that coming from Joe Biden's lips is going to be a joke. But they're smart enough to try to get ahead of this and build a narrative. The other thing they're doing is they're flooding the zone today, I think, with every candidate that ran against them. That's going to be the Greek chorus that supports and reinforces this meme that Joe Biden's the friend of the working man, that Joe Biden's looking out for the middle class, that Joe Biden is looking for American jobs and American workers and a Buy American. So I want you to go through this. When you say 6 decades, that's Joe Biden's professional political career.
Absolutely. Joe Biden is the globalist of the first water, and he represents the global corporations all headquartered in Delaware. Jared Bernstein is one of our guys. By our guys, I mean an economic nationalist. And Steve, in the war room in 2016 in Trump Tower, we were referring to Jared Bernstein's work in the Economic Policy Institute and putting it into candidate Trump's speeches. I mean, Bernstein gets it. But Joe Biden apparently has forgotten who he is and who he was. His mental capacities are diminishing. He can't even remember that he is opposed to everything he's now saying. His whole career has been built on outsourcing jobs, outsourcing our industries, building this borderless world for the free flow of people, goods, and money that cost us uncounted tens of millions of jobs. So for him to now, this is further example that he's either A, not going to be running the show, or B, doesn't even know what he's saying. Because this is
he's not going to be running the show. He doesn't know where he is half the time. And here's the other thing: it doesn't matter. Okay, right. They've made a decision. They're going to put a coalition together. They don't even believe Bernstein's stuff. You know, Jared Bernstein's a brilliant guy, and you're right. Even when I was back at Breitbart, we used to link to his stuff all the time. He's a very smart guy and a very tough guy. Right? But the Democratic Party, the globalists on Wall Street, and the globalists of the corporations, they don't believe in Bernstein any more than the Wall Street faction of the Republican Party believes in Peter Navarro. You know, it's going to be enough. But for an election, and particularly that blue wall that we breached in Michigan, Wisconsin, Ohio, and Pennsylvania, Bernstein's policies are going to be front and center. And the media will never hold them up to the hypocrisy of this. I want to go through how savvy they wrote this. I want to go back to something you say. Talk about what they've incorporated in President Trump's program already and kind of repurpose it into their thing. Go through the details of what they're talking about, particularly on drugs and others. We're going to have in the next segment. We may keep you over, Curtis. We're going to have Rosemary Gibson, but go back and actually walk through what Biden's proposing today.
They're talking about using federal procurement to buy American drugs. They talk about critical supply chains, particularly pharmaceuticals, medical devices, personal protective gear, and drugs, medicines. They talk about building a stockpile of these drugs and equipment. President Trump's already done that. And the use of federal procurement to buy it. President Trump already did that. You remember in the beginning of June, we gave a contract for hundreds of millions of dollars to stand up a domestic company, a domestic producer of critical drugs that will be stockpiled. The new company is based in Richmond, Virginia, and the federal government's going to buy the entire output of its factory and put it in a stockpile. So he's talking about stuff that President Trump's already done. He's talking about studying critical supply chains. There's about 5 pieces of legislation in Congress right now that talks about studying vulnerabilities in critical supply chains. Marco Rubio, of all people, is sponsoring one of these pieces of legislation. So that's just happy talk on the part of Biden. There's really less here than meets the eye. And Bernstein, who is the unnamed senior advisor, is quoted in the Wall Street Journal today as saying, we're not going to do anything that violates World Trade Organization rules. Well, right there, that kneecaps the entire program, because World Trade Organization Government Procurement Annex requires that we give foreign companies the same treatment as Curtis, companies.
Curtis,
so when you say buy American, you're a company in Germany, or
Curtis,
Curtis,
we've got a break. Curtis,
we want to hold you to the other break.
Curtis, we've got a break. We'll come back to you in just a second. But the breaking news before the break is the Supreme Court is ruling the Manhattan DA can subpoena Trump's financial records. This is breaking news coming out right now. We'll have more on that after the break. There are 2 decisions on this that we're expecting today. The SCOTUS decision saying that New York can access President Trump's financial records. The decision 7-2. We'll talk about that more after this break. It is a big day. Don't miss any second of this show. We'll be right back. # War Room Pandemic.
Right.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, welcome back to the War Room, broadcasting live from Capitol Hill on Thursday, July the 9th. Greg Mans, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam here. The breaking news before we went to break was that the Supreme Court ruling that the New York DA can access President Trump's financial records, including his taxation records. The surprise, maybe the shock one, Greg, in there is Kavanaugh was in the 7-2 majority.
That's correct, and Gorsuch.
And Gorsuch against the president in this ruling. Back over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Who are the two? With Judge Roberts also? Who are the two that's Alito and Thomas?
Alito and Thomas. Correct.
Yep. The two blocking backs here, right? It's a pretty shocking decision, and I think even more as a shocking outcome of 7-2. Give me some hot takes. We're gonna get Rosemary Gibson on here in a second. We're gonna get Curtis Ellis back. We got a lot to go through the day. This is an ever turbulent day, and that's why we're so glad that NetSuite by Oracle is one of our key sponsors. NetSuite by Oracle is the software package that every entrepreneur needs to get through turbulent times. And if you don't think they're turbulent, you wait till the rest of the summer. The summer of love plays out here in the United States. Guys, we're trying to get either Jim Schultz or Bill McGinley on to give us some perspective here, given their time in the White House counsel's office and how they're really major constitutional lawyers. But what's the hot take so far about what, particularly the opposition party media, what are they saying right now about this decision?
Well, I have to say there's a lot of hot takes coming from the left, Steve. There's a lot of response from the right yet. I think a lot of people seem maybe dumbfounded by this. Not much chatter about it, but a lot of celebration coming out from the political left on social media already. No doubt the news networks will be catching up with this as it goes along. But remember, we have several decisions from the Supreme Court today, and the last one that just came out was the 7-2 Thomas and Alito in dissent about the Trump's tax returns and financials. Did you have something for us, Jack? I know you're watching the TVs behind me.
No, I was going to go back to what we were talking with Biden, but yes, it sounds like it's only for the grand jury, so it doesn't mean that these are going to be released to the world, but the grand jury has the right to look at them. I think that's kind of key too.
We're getting more details.
Oh yeah,
on that.
I'm sure they won't get leaked. Jack, Max, I'm sure they won't be leaked. It's just it's the sacred grand jury process.
No. I understand, but I mean, there's a legal technicality there,
I appreciate Jack's specificity there.
Yeah.
Steve, back over to you. We're going to dig more into this ruling and bring you details as we have it.
If we could go back,
to some of our
go back to Biden's plan, because I think it's very important. Yes, he is parroting Navarro's executive order about bringing the supply chains home, but he also has some other very, very interesting things that I think our viewers would not be interested in. Fight climate change.
Well, Jack, hang on for 1 second. Just hold that until Curtis comes back on. I want to go to Rosemary Gibson. She's under time pressure. We introduced Rosemary on this show back, I think, in January. She first started War Room Pandemic, and the reason was we want to get our arms around these critical medical supplies, PPE, ventilators, drugs, etc. She had written a book when it first came out. Not a lot of people knew about it. Now, the reason was the drug industry tried to suppress it, the pharmaceutical industry. But the book is called China RX. She's a co-author of it. It's a brilliant book. But Rosemary, you've been one of the big voices now for months and months and months on this Buy American program that is the Buy American program that really starts to bring these whole medical supply chains back. The White House supposedly has been working on this for several months. We don't know what the hang-up is, but then Joe Biden kind of jumps in front here and includes it in his Buy American program. What is exactly going on? How close? First off, how important is? Explain that to the audience. And you've had a chance, hopefully, to see the Biden proposal. Is the President Trump proposal going to have more teeth in it? And why is it hung up? Where does it stand right now?
Steve, great to be with you. Yeah, there's been a Buy American executive order in draft for a number of months since earlier this year. And just to be clear on what it would do, there's essential drugs that you need to take care of sick people, and we can't make them because we've outsourced most of them to China, which controls the core chemicals for them. And so we're in a situation now where the Buy American executive order would just deal with those essential drugs and have the federal departments like DOD and the VA and HHS, which buy medicines, to favor domestic companies that make them. And that will stimulate a lot of companies here in the U.S. to start production, because right now we can't make these things anymore. And the coronavirus pandemic revealed that our trading partners will shut everything down. And this executive order has been held up. And the reason is there are powerful special interests that are saying outrageous things. They're saying that Buy American for essential drugs that a country needs to survive would cause more harm than good. And meanwhile, we have shortages here in this country. I was just on a phone last week with a doctor, and they can't this doctor can't get basic drugs.
Rosemary, I want to ask, I know we got a time thing for you about
Sure.
10:45, and I want to get into this whole argument that the pharmaceutical industry is making this big, it's going to cost so much more. I want to get into that, but we're trying to handle some breaking news. Team,
Sure.
do we have Jim Schultz available to come in and talk about the Supreme Court decision?
We have Jim Schultz, and we also have new news, the Supreme Court ruling that they won't allow Congress to get Trump's tax and financial records for now. That's a tweet coming out from the Associated Press White House correspondent. We're watching the developments on that, but it looks like that's a 7-2 decision. Also, bringing in Jim Schultz now, former White House Associate Counsel. Jim, thanks for joining us this morning on War and Pandemic.
Pleasure to be on.
Hey, Steve, over to you.
Hey, how are we supposed to, so Jim, you're the smart guy on this. How are we supposed to interpret this?
So I think the Supreme Court on the state court decision basically said, look, the president does not have absolute immunity from criminal prosecution, and therefore the state grand jury can subpoena his tax records in connection with its investigation. That being said, the state grand jury has its own secrecy rules associated with that as well. And what goes into the grand jury is supposed to stay into a grand jury unless and until such time that there's a criminal prosecution or indictment. So there are secrecy rules associated with that as well. As it relates to the Congress, that's no surprise that the justices sided with the president, with President Trump as it relates to Congress, because they have no legitimate legislative purpose for requesting this. The fact that they were asking for his tax returns for some potential legislation is an absolute sham and a cover for the fact that they just want to make this a political fishing expedition.
Is this, do you consider this a draw? Is it more important that the prosecutors can get it, or the Congress?
I view it as a win. I view it as a win for the president and executive powers, because you can't have this kind of harassment from the legislature. I mean, remember, they were seeking tax returns long before the president was the president of the United States. He was Mr. Trump, not President Trump at that time. So there's really no legitimate legislative purpose to their request, and I think this is a win for the president. As it relates to the state grand jury, like I said, they're going to have to abide by the grand jury rules, the secrecy rules in New York, in the subpoenaing of those documents. So I don't think you're going to see those hitting the press anytime soon.
Just from the politics of it, do you think that given the process that any of these things can leak and be politicized or weaponized against the president in the grand jury or the DA in Manhattan? Do you think there's an issue here, or is this all going to happen after November 3rd?
There are criminal penalties for leaking grand jury information, and to the extent we had a similar issue happen in the state of Pennsylvania a few years ago. And look, there are grave consequences when a prosecutor leaks grand jury information, and I think that everyone needs to be mindful of that as we move forward in this in watching this.
Just for a net before I lose you, what do you think? Is this a win for the president, a draw? How would you assess it inside the White House?
I assess it absolute win for the president, that Congress can't get their mitts on their sham of a request. No doubt about it. It's a win for the president.
Jim from Cousin O'Connor in Philadelphia, former Deputy White House Counsel, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you.
Raheem, let's get the hashtag War Room Pandemic. We're going to hold Rosemary Gibson over to the next segment, and Curtis Ellis is also going to come back and join us. We're going to get to all of this, the economic nationalism and this kind of Joe Biden buy America. A lot of things in the Biden program are what Rosemary Gibson's been talking about for months and months and months. We're going to have her walk you through it, and particularly the resistance to this. The question is, why wasn't this done back in essentially February or March when Rosemary Gibson was beating the drum? And Raheem, I'd like to know what hashtag the War Room Pandemic crowd, also in the live chat, what's going on, what are their comments on this? Is a pretty historic day so far.
Yeah, already, and I think people are starting to realize exactly what Jim Schultz just said. The first decision sounding pretty harrowing for the president there, but the second decision absolutely being seen as a win, that Congress won't be able to see these themselves. Now, as you say, Steve, there's nothing particular to say that the grand jury isn't going to leak out any details that they want leaked out of the president's financial details and tax returns, and we're going to have to keep a close eye on that. But at the moment, people in the live chat, people on the hashtag War and Pandemic, pretty relieved that Congress itself won't be able to get a handle on this. Greg Mans, we got about 30 seconds.
Just an important distinction in the second case, the congressional one, they're sending it back to the lower courts to flush out the separation of powers issue.
Fascinating stuff. Steve, we've got to jump to a break now. When we come back, we'll have Rosemary Gibson back again talking about Buy American, talking about all of the things that have come out and are going to keep coming out from the Biden campaign this morning. Questions have to be asked, though. If they're going to spend so many hundreds of billions of dollars on U.S. technology, what's the point if you're just giving that technology away for free to China and letting them steal it? We'll get back into that and more. Hashtag War and Pandemic after this break.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon. We cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Welcome back to the War Room. Greg Mans, Jack Maxey, and Raheem Kassam here on Capitol Hill. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Look, in these turbulent times, if you're an entrepreneur, you know you're going to lead us through this. There's incredible opportunities created in times like these, but you got to be able to seize those opportunities. One way to do it is have a software package that solves all your problems, whether it's inventory, your financial projections, your capital asset pricing model, all of it. NetSuite by Oracle is a software package for you. If your company's $1 million in revenue to $100 million in revenue, you need this package if you're an entrepreneur. Go to netsuite.com/Bannon, Bannon, and get today the 7 action steps every entrepreneur should be taking at these turbulent times. Talking about turbulent times, one way to get past that is to make sure we bring our manufacturing base back here to the United States. In this half hour, we're going to have Rosemary Gibson talk about the medical supply chain. Then we're going to get Curtis Ellis, the head of policy for the Trump PAC, to talk about the overall policy, because it looks like Joe Biden's stolen that theme with this Buy American program. Rosemary, is a great compliment to you. You know, Curtis said, hey, Jared Bernstein's listening to War Room Pandemic and listening to the show, and he's writing down notes. They definitely are, and one of the notes they're writing down is you. You have been on this show time and time and time again to talk about this national security crisis based around the medical supply chain. Right now, this pandemic is one of the things of the pandemic, it showed us that, but you had a solution for it. Walk through what your solution was. Walk through what happened in Richmond, because you did get part of it. But why has it been a resistance by the pharmaceutical industry? What argument are they making that hangs this thing up so it can't get signed?
Thanks, Steve. Well, first, what we need to do is and the pandemic has shown that we can't rely on other countries for essential medicines and supplies. We got to make them here. And that's because other countries kept what they made for themselves. So we have to have some domestic manufacturing of the things that are most important for our survival. And the Buy American executive order, it's been in draft, been hanging around for a while under review, and it seems to be stuck, although there are reports it might be signed this week. And here's why it's important. And what it will do is allow us the incentive for the federal government, which buys a lot of medicine for the DOD, the VA, HHS, to have the incentive to buy products manufactured here in the United States. And that will allow companies all over the country to pop up, because they'll finally have a customer base that wants to buy a made in America generic drug, antibiotic, sedative, whatever we need. So where's the opposition coming from? And Biden's going to face the same thing. It's coming from the special interests that like the supply chain exactly the way it is. And here's the dynamic of what's really going on, Steve. What the companies have done, big companies, they want to sell high-end drugs in China where they get the most margin. And they see a market of 1.3 billion people. And what are they doing? They're basically throwing under the bus and allowing China then to make a access to they'll be making our generic drugs, the 90% of the medicines we make. They're giving away the store. I spoke to a guy who worked in a big company that made drugs, and he said, we gave all the specs away for these cheap now generic commodity products. We gave all that away to China, so our company would curry favor and have access to their big market to sell their branded products and make the most money. That's what's happening. And meanwhile, the narrative out there from the special interests is, oh, if this Buy American executive order will be turning our backs on our trading partners. You know who they're turning their backs on? They're turning their backs on the American people. I was on a phone call, I started to say earlier, with a doctor last week. They cannot get the basic antibiotics. He says they're being rationed, and I got my allocation. And you won't hear any of this in the news, but this is what's happening behind the scenes. So this is what's at stake. And whether it's President Trump or Joe Biden, they're going to face the exact same situation that we have now from these special interests that are fighting tooth and nail and trying to stop this Buy American executive order from getting out. What I ask your viewers and listeners to do is to follow me on Twitter at Rosemary100. Right at the top, go in and write a comment on the White House website that we want the Buy American executive order signed. And we've got to get it going. This has to be the people, because we just can't be thrown under the bus like this. And that's exactly what's happening.
There's two things I want to get to by the limited time we've got with you. Number one, they make a cost argument that it's going to cost seniors, it's going to cost people with drugs, it's going to cost people more. Number one, is that true? And number two, if it is true, what is the cost differential? Is it a big deal from having them made here and having high value added jobs? Is the transportation cost, everything offset, obviously the higher labor costs? Is it true? They make a case that people's drugs are going to be higher. Is that true? And if it is true, is it marginally higher or a lot higher?
Steve, let me tell you a true story. So there's a gentleman I met who works in manufacturing plants making drugs. He was taking lisinopril, a common blood pressure medicine. He went to buy it at a pharmacy for $157.50. That's what they were charging 90 days. He said, I know how much the manufacturer would get paid for that. It's $1. The manufacturer would be paid $1. So it's not the manufacturing that's the problem in terms of price. It's everybody else, and in between them and the customer, that's the pricing problem we have to fix. That said, the advanced manufacturing that was been funded down in Richmond, Virginia, we can actually make these generic drugs faster and cheaper, up to 30-40% cheaper per pill, because of new technology, and using that process is much less labor intensive, much smaller environmental footprint. And you know the other thing that's so important, Steve, the FDA now is not in those plants in China inspecting them anymore because of COVID. It's all been shut down, those inspections. So we are getting unregulated products because the FDA can no longer protect us for the foreseeable future. I think it's going to be a long time before those federal government inspectors, God bless them, will be able to get into those Chinese plants and really protect the American people. So the industry has a narrative out there, and it's not about you and me. It's about maintaining their market share in China and doing the bidding for China. And they lie. The U.S. Chamber of Commerce came out and said, oh, no worry here. We can do 70% of our manufacturing here in the U.S. Good luck with that, because it's just simply not true. So we've got to fight through the false narratives, and the people have to stand up and speak out. Go and tell the White House you want that executive order signed, because we have to stand up against the special interests. This is a matter of our survival. These are things that a society needs to survive. And we can't make them anymore. And believe it or not, there are forces that want us to remain dependent. And remember, China threatened to withhold medicines from the United States. And I've heard from two very credible sources, a gentleman from the industry and someone at a high-level government position, who said they've heard that China has told its companies not to send products to the United States to make medicine.
Look, the Chinese Communist Party is the enemy of their own people. It's the enemy of the American people. We cannot allow an enemy of the American people to have a strategic chokehold on vital medicines, and that's what we've allowed to do. And the running dogs that are spinning this for the Chinese Communist Party is outrageous. We only got a few minutes left. I want to be very specific. Go back to Richmond. President Trump, Peter Navarro, and the team over there actually did take action that you helped craft. Walk through exactly what happened in Richmond, and how come we haven't seen more of it?
What that capability will do, in full disclosure, I'm an independent board member. I've received no money from them. My job is to ensure that the public interest, our interest, is fulfilled. That has two purposes. One, using more traditional practices to get drugs in the strategic stockpile now that have been in shortage. The second thing is to stand up advanced manufacturing of critical drugs that our country needs to survive. And so they're getting that plant set up, and they want to start producing product as soon as possible. It takes time. You just can't flip on a switch. And that will be the first end-to-end, fully made in the United States, generic drugs for our country. And they will keep on supplying the strategic national stockpile and have a backup plan. So the next time we have a disaster or a pandemic, we won't have to have shortages of these critical drugs because there's a backup plan to make them right next door. It's a great win. But why don't we have more of it? We need 50 of these places. And that's why the Buy American executive order is so important, because you need customers. You need people who are willing to pay these manufacturers. I can set up a plant tomorrow. We can all do that. But unless we have people willing to buy and not go to China just because companies want to curry favor with China and sell out the American people, that's not going to help us. So the Buy American order will give government customers to launch domestic manufacturing of critical drugs here in the United States. That's why it has to be signed. It's gone on too long. We got to fix it.
This is why Joe Biden included in his Buy American program. Rosemary, once again, we know you got to bounce. How do people get access to you? You're one of the great patriots out there. You've been banging the drum on this for years. How do they get access to your thinking?
Sure. Go to Rosemary100 on Twitter, Steve, and follow me. Right at the top, get the executive order, go in there and tell the White House to sign it now. Send a message to the special interests. And I hope you'll all read China RX. I wrote it in the public interest. I'm sure the industry would have paid me not to write it, but the public deserves the truth. And we donate proceeds to good causes. So I hope your readers and viewers and listeners will take a look at it, spread the word, and together we can make a difference. We already have, without a doubt, but we got to keep going. It's a big mountain to climb, but we're climbing.
Well, we know that you've got the White House's ears because you're actively working to get these done, and also now you've got the Biden campaign is listening to every word you say. So it's included.
Yeah, and
Rosemary, thank you.
Also, I'm happy to say that in Congress there's bipartisan bills popping up that have some really great provisions, and I hope people see this as a bipartisan issue. Because I'll tell you, if you've got to go into an emergency room for something and doesn't matter who you are, they won't ask if you're Democrat or Republican, unlike Ronald Reagan. You need this thing. We all need this. We're in the same boat together, so we've got to make this work.
Rosemary, thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Oh, thank you, Steve. Okay.
Hey, guys, I want to bring in Curtis in the next segment. Do we have, what's the hashtag War Room Posse? I know we only got a minute or so left. What is the hashtag War Room Posse saying about everything this morning, particularly this Buy American and also the Supreme Court decision?
Steve, I want to put this to you from the hashtag War and Pandemic crowd, and perhaps you can answer it. We've got about 90 seconds. The question is, maybe I'm not understanding something, but I don't see how Joe Biden making this announcement will carry much weight. At this point, isn't it just a quasi-campaign promise he has no power?
I agree, except for the fact that they're going to be driving this home with advertising. This is one of the themes of their campaign. They understand to win, they've got to push economic nationalism, and it's incumbent upon people, particularly for low information voters, it's incumbent upon the White House and the campaign to make sure that they highlight this. They're going to be hammering Joe Biden on his historic record as a globalist. We're going to have in the next segment bring Curtis Ellis back as one of the top experts of that. But this is why also, as importantly, it's got to be action, action, action. This Buy American order could have been signed months ago, and you could have had even more teeth in it. You could have done more for bringing jobs back and buying American. And the DPA side, the president's done more than anybody, but quite frankly, they're going to try to do an end run. And this is, you're right, I think it should be a tough sell, but you have to make it a tough sell. Because what they're going to do is say, hey, forget globalist Joe, forget Joe from Wilmington. You know, they call him Joe from Scranton. So it's incumbent upon making that case. And I agree with you. It shows you the hypocrisy, but it also shows you how important President Trump's policies are. You know, they've had this guy, Jared Bernstein, on this from the beginning. So President Trump's policy is a winning policy. You got to execute on it.
Steve, we got to bounce. We'll come back with more of that, more Curtis Ellis, and how this relates to the latest polling, the Cook Political Report. Hashtag War Room Pandemic returns in just a second.
War Room Pandemic with Stephen K. Bannon.
The epidemic is a demon, and we cannot let this demon hide.
War Room Pandemic. Here's your host, Stephen K. Bannon.
Okay, welcome back to the War Room. Greg Manns, Jack Maxey, Raheem Kassam here on Capitol Hill. More breaking news. Deutsche Bank saying they will comply with the Supreme Court's decisions that we've announced earlier on this show today about the president's financial records and tax returns. Over to Stephen K. Bannon.
Yeah, we're going to get to President Trump's actually telling us what he thinks on his Twitter stream. Raheem's going to put that together and read it to you in a second. But it's a historic day, and it's going to have big implications. Look, these are very turbulent times. Any viewer or listener to War and Pandemic, whether on radio, podcast, or on TV or streaming, knows that we go from Hong Kong to the halls of Washington and everywhere in between to talk to you about these turbulent times. Today on CNBC, they had a great analysis that the stocks are rising and gold's rising at the same time. Somebody called gold the new Bitcoin. If you want to find out more about having precious metals in your investment portfolio, you got your stocks, your bonds, your real estate, but if you want to also think about precious metals as a hedge during turbulent times, go to birchgold.com. Birchgold.com/Bannon, Bannon. They've got a 20-page report. What they want you to do is read the report and then contact them. This report is really stunning. It's very smart. I've gone through it a couple of times. That's birchgold.com/Bannon, Bannon. Get your report today about precious metals in your portfolio in turbulent times. Okay, talking about turbulent times, we've got Curtis Ellis here. We've also got a time constraint on him like we had with Rosemary Gibson. Curtis, I want to go back to this. The president was the first person in this country as a political candidate to bring Buy American up and made it a centerpiece of his campaign. That's what people like you and Peter Navarro, who nobody, quite frankly, had ever heard of a couple of years ago, but you've been working on this for decades, came to the forefront, became people that were on TV all the time, and their ideas are really being worked through. So walk us through why Biden did it and why you think this is particular. I know you do because you've been working it so long, why it's so phony coming from somebody like Joe Biden, who's essentially been one of the biggest, if not the biggest globalist in the U.S. Senate for his 40-year career.
Well, let's start with your first part of your question. Why is this so important? Here at America First Policies, we've been doing focus groups consistently across the Midwest, across the country. And the one issue that pops out all the time, everybody hates NAFTA. They hate these trade agreements. They get it. The people get it. It's destroyed our country, destroyed tens of millions of jobs, destroyed the middle class. Joe Biden has been responsible for all of that. He backed NAFTA. We bring that up in the focus groups. People immediately dismiss him. Even if they don't themselves have lost a job from NAFTA, they know someone who has. They know it's been bad for their community. Even if they work in an unrelated industry, they know what it's done. So the other thing to remember here, Steve, and everybody else, 2004, Obama and Biden in the primaries running against Hillary Clinton in Ohio. Biden and Obama say, we're going to renegotiate NAFTA because they knew it was a winning strategy, a winning cause, a winning issue. While Obama is saying that publicly, one of his top advisors is on the phone to the Canadian Prime Minister and Ambassador saying, don't listen to what he's saying, it's empty campaign rhetoric. So that's what we're seeing again here. Biden is the tribune of the globalists. He's the guy who's outsourced all the jobs. He is the man who was the point man for the Trans-Pacific Partnership. And he is now doing this makeover, he's cross-dressing as an economic nationalist. He's forgotten who he is. Now, you look in the details of this thing. He's ripped every page out of President Trump's playbook, ripped, as we pointed out, as Rosemary Gibson pointed out, taken the entire executive order, the ones that have been instituted and the ones that's still in the works, and he's now copying and pasting them into his program. He cannot be believed. He's taken both sides of every issue. And one thing that is missing from his proposal is anything to do with guest workers. President Trump just cut off all immigration for workers while we have double-digit unemployment. Biden says nothing about guest workers. He gives some empty rhetoric about job training, something that Trump is already doing. So, and he also very significantly says, we will not do anything that contravenes World Trade Organization rules. President Trump is ready to pull out of the World Trade Organization, and he ought to, I would suggest he do that right now. That as you say, action, action, action. President Trump has the ability, the power, and the office to take action. All Biden can do is issue empty campaign promises that, according to his record, he will never fulfill.
Hey, Curtis.
Okay, Curtis, we got about 2 minutes. What are the actions that President Trump has to take? You know, we should never be in this situation. That EO should have been signed months ago. What actions do the White House and President Trump need to take today, in your opinion?
He can sign the pharmaceutical supply chain executive order that would steal the thunder from Biden right now. He can direct Customs and Border Protection to turn back goods made with slave labor. That can be done immediately. And I know, I was in the International Labor Affairs Bureau, Labor Department. We know who is making their stuff with slave labor. They can turn that back right now. Do it. Do it once. That would send a shockwave through the garment industry and so many other industries that are using slave labor to produce their goods. He could direct the United States to pull out of the government procurement annex of the World Trade Organization that gives a country with a $10 national budget access to our government procurement so that we get access to their $10 procurement budget. Not fair, not reciprocal. Cancel that right now. Let the World Trade Organization sue us. He could impose countervailing duties on countries that are using export subsidies in the form of value-added taxes to subsidize their exports to the United States. Let's put a countervailing duty on that, level up the playing field. Those are three actions he could take right now that would have a dramatic effect on
Steve, we got 45 seconds, Steve.
Curtis, in 15 seconds, Curtis, why is he not doing these actions? Those actions right there are very powerful. Why are they not being done?
He's got some. There's some holdovers from both administrations and both parties that don't believe in the Trump agenda, and they're trying to kneecap it.
Okay, Curtis Ellis. Curtis, how do you get to what's your Twitter handle?
It's Curtis W. Ellis, at Curtis W. Ellis, and America First POL.
Don't go anywhere. We'll be right back with more War Room Pandemic. Dave Ramaswamy, Natalie Winters, and more after this break.